Today is Mike Crowley. He's going to be talking on the Secret Drugs of Buddhism. Mike was born in 1948 in Wales, and he moved to London. He was born recently. He's about 24 years old, and
I worry a lot.
he moved to London in an undetermined time, where he befriended a Tibetan lama and soon became a student. He was then ordained as a layman in the Kagyud lineage of Tibetan Buddhism. And after 20 years of further study and meditation, Mike was ordained as a lama, which is a qualified teacher of Tibetan Buddhism. So if I could have a big round of applause for Mike Crowley.
Great. So I gave the title of my talk as Secret Drugs of Buddhism because I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to talk about. But I decided to give you a preview of a paper which is, I hope, going to be published in Time and Mind, a British journal, later this year. So, wait, before I start, how many people here are Buddhists? We've got like half a dozen, so, yeah, okay. How many are Vajrayana Buddhists? I think it's the same people. And so, how many people who practice Vajrayana Buddhism have done their mundro? All right, so you know about Amrita then. If you've done Doje Sempa, then you know that you visualize Amrita coming from either his big toe or his penis, depending on which practice you do. But it comes into the top of your head, fills your body, and purifies you. Right. So, what is Amrita, or in Tibetan, Dutsi? Anybody know? But I would have expected you to at least know that it's a drug, right? It's a psychedelic, or at least psychoactive substance. The first occurrence of the word that we know about is in the Rig Veda, and there it's a synonym for soma. Soma means juice. It comes from the word, from the Sanskrit root su, meaning to press out. So it is that which is expressed, or succinctly we'd say juice. But there are several other synonyms for it in the Rig Veda, including shukra, which means clear, or indu, which means a drop. But the most widely used synonym for it is amrita. Amrita means, well, mri is the root for death or die. Mrityu is death, and amrita means no death or immortality. And so basically it's the elixir of immortality. About 2,000 years after the composition of the Rig Veda, we find tantric cults springing up in India. Nobody is really clear about the roots of Tantra. We do know that Buddhism borrowed heavily from Shaiva, that's Shivite Tantra, and especially from the cult of the Kapalikas, the skull bearers. But it had some of its own indigenous, if you could use that expression for a religion, its own homegrown deities. It imported a lot of versions of Shiva. You know, you've got Mahakala, you've got Ishana, you've got Vajrabhairava. Oh, there's a bunch of them, and they're all Shiva. Oh, even Avalokiteshvara, the well-known Chinese of Tibetan Buddhism, is actually a form of Shiva, and he carries Shiva's attributes. He also has a blue throat, which, as we will see, is quite significant. Now, do you see anything funny about this image? That Oh, I see. Oh, yeah, there you go. Oh. There. Okay. Does anything look strange about this Buddha? No, he's a completely normal Buddha. But if you saw him walking down the street, I'm sure you'd say, what's that funny bump on the top of his head? It's called an Ushnisha. It's the first of the 32 lakshana, which are the marks of a Buddha. Buddhas are born with this. Well, that's the story. It actually derives from statues from Gandhara. Anybody familiar with the kingdom of Gandhara? These days it's called Kandahar. It's in eastern Afghanistan and Pakistan. It was a holdover from Alexander the Great's incursions into Asia. They were basically Bactrian and Scythian people who adopted Greek culture. They spoke Greek. They had Greek temples. They had coins with Heracles on them. And in the 2nd century BC, King Menander, we're not sure if it was Menander the First or Menander the Second, but he converted to Buddhism. There is a Pali text called the Milinda Panha, which is the questions of Milinda, and Milinda is the Pali version of Menander. They took up Buddhism, and the coins with Heracles on them now had Buddha on one side and Heracles on the other. And it said Bodo in Greek letters. Very cute. But they were the first people to actually have depictions of the Buddha. I'm just going to ferret around in this file and see if I can find the illustration I want. Let me... No, can't find it. All right. So, in these depictions, they showed the Buddha with a top knot, their hair tied on top of the head, like the Scythians, the Central Asians, used to wear. But as the image of the Buddha got migrated from Gandhara, this was interpreted as an actual bump on the Buddha's head. Now, having established that, I'd like to read you a little bit from a book published in 1958 called The Buddhist Iconography. And this was an attempt to catalogue all known Indian Buddhist deities, like Fat Chance. Lokesh Chandra did it in 15 volumes and 4,500 pages. But this chap in Binoy Bhattacharya tried to do it in one book. And anyway, he was stumped when he came to a certain group of deities. I'll read you what he said. In Vajrayana, there is a class of deities going under the generic name of Ushnishas. The word Ushnisha means the crown of the head, but the deities have nothing to do with the crown. They are nevertheless popular in tantric works, and their statues are found in China. Hence, it is necessary to make a passing reference to these Ushnisha gods briefly. Then he goes on to list 8. He was working from a medieval text of mandalas, and it had one list of 8 Ushnishas, the Ashtoshnisha, the 8 Ushnishas. If we look a bit wider far than this one book, we'll find that there are actually several different Ashdoshnishas, several different groups of 8 Oshnishas, and they have different members. And there's also a group of 3 Oshnishas, 5 Oshnishas, 9, 10. They were not only were they popular, but people loved to put them in lists. So I propose that we take a closer look at these Ushnisha deities, and I think we'll find some very interesting features of them. Oh, there is a book called the Buddhist Encyclopedia, which actually, it doesn't cite a source, but it gives an explanation of the Oshnishas. It says they're the personified virtues and actions of Shakyamuni. That is the historical Buddha. For example, Buddhoshnisha represents the preaching of the doctrine. Mahoshnisha represents the great wheel used as a weapon when preaching to people to release them from ignorance. This is I mean, suddenly we're talking about wheels, and wheels which are used as a weapon. I mean, is this wheel so big it flattens people? Anyway, Siddhartha Troshnisha, that means white umbrella Oshnisha, is a shelter for all living beings. Abhyudgat Oshnisha has the power to produce the virtues of the Buddha, and you absolutely cannot derive that from the name, as we all see when we look at the names of these deities. Who has the power to produce the virtues of a Buddha, and Tathagata Vikranoshnisha, the power to break down evil deeds, and so on. I mean, this is a really disparate list. So I think the "and so on" is somewhat disingenuous. It's like, what do you mean "and so on"? You know, you might tell me the next one. You know, it means a giant lizard that speaks French. You know, there is no "and so on" here. So in the Nishpana Yoga Vali, the list of 8 Oshnishas is as follows. There's the Great Ushnisha, the Emerging Ushnisha, White Parasol Ushnisha, Great Emerging Ushnisha, Splendor Mass, Strength, Conquest, Scattered. These are really strange names for deities. There is another one from China, in the Forbidden City of China, of Beijing. There is a Vajrayana temple, a Tibetan Buddhist style temple. Literally, it's actually Mongolian, because the Mongols were once emperors of China, and they brought their Vajrayana Buddhism with them. And so in the Forbidden City, there is the Baoxianglu, which is the Vajrayana temple, and it contains over 700 deities, which are all conveniently labeled. And there is a list, there is a group there of 8 Oshnishas, and they are Thunderbolt Ushnisha, Blazing Ushnisha, Gem Ushnisha, Banner Ushnisha, Lotus Ushnisha, Pungent Ushnisha, and Universal Ushnisha, and Umbrella Ushnisha. I think Pungent is very interesting. So, and then there's another list of 8 from Japan. And they are Great Ushnisha, Sprouting Ushnisha, Endless Cry Hearing Ushnisha, White Parasol Ushnisha, Victory Ushnisha, Conquest Ushnisha, Splendor Mass Ushnisha, and Scattered Ushnisha again. Now the strange thing about this list is that they're assigned colors. Now this is not unusual in tantric deities. Anybody who's seen tantric art realizes that there are blue Buddhas and red ones and green ones and yellow and white and so on. but they're usually very, very distinct colors and very, very vivid colors. Here are the colors of the Japanese 8 Ushnishas. White, yellow, red, golden, saffron, pale yellow, white, and off-white. Now, these are not so much like the kind of colors that we're used to seeing in tantric works. These are more the kind of colors that you see in a field guide, you know, to wildflowers, say, or mushrooms. So, the deities in these lists by no means exhaust the various deities with Ushnisha somewhere in their name. Some prominent Ushnisha deities omitted from these lists include Ushnisha Chakravartin, the crown bump, wheel turner, Ushnisha Buddha, Ushnisha Jvala, which is blaze Ushnisha, and the goddess Ushnisha Vijaya, which has at least 6 different forms, and a male equivalent called Ushnisha Vijaya. Note the short final A shows it's masculine. We'll see that Dr. Bhattacharya was absolutely right when he said these were important at one time, and that yeah, they certainly were, and there are a lot more of them that he doesn't list. Now, I'm going to see if I can find. Let's see. Okay, that's. This is in Tibetan. She's known as Duk Karma. This is a Tibetan print, and her name in Tibetan just means white umbrella, which is what she's holding. Here's another version of her, a bit more elaborate, with 8 arms, and she's holding not only an umbrella but also a banner of victory, a wheel, and a bunch of other things. Okay, there she is in her more familiar form. She has 1,000 arms, 1,000 heads, 1,000 legs, and 1 billion eyes. And the eyes are distributed over her body. Now, her name, Ushnisha Sita Tapatra, Atapatra. Ushnisha, as we've seen, is the crown bump, the bump on Buddha's heads. Sita means pale or white. Atapatra is, it literally means parasol. It's the term which is used for the parasol which is held over a king's head. It's as much a symbol of royalty as it is a sunshade. But there's another peculiarity about it. Now, I don't know how many of you know this, but Sanskrit is not a natural language. Sanskrit is a synthetic language that was created. Its creation is attributed to someone called Panini. And when the 5 Aryan tribes invaded India about 2500 BC, their dialects were mutually unintelligible, so the story goes. And so Panini made a common language for everyone, a language that everyone could understand. And so he merged all these 5 dialects, and he removed all irregularities. So there are no irregular verbs in Sanskrit. So it's, in that way, it's a lot easier to learn than, say, French or German. But despite the fact that Sanskrit has an absolutely vast vocabulary, I mean, people say the Greeks had a word for it, but the size of the Greek vocabulary really pales beside Sanskrit. Nonetheless, Sanskrit has no word for mushroom. And I think this is probably significant. It probably means that it was removed, or more likely, never included when Panini created the new language. Oh, Sanskrit, by the way, means the perfected one. In other words, it doesn't have any irregularities. So, if you wanted to say mushroom in Sanskrit, what would you say? Well, there were a couple of ways around it. You would say umbrella or parasol. That was very common. So there are two words, chatra or atapatra. And there were some other like linguistic circumlocutions like shilindra, shilindraka, uchilindra. These all basically mean maggoty things. Uchilindra means a sprouting maggoty thing. So, it was pretty awkward to say mushroom. But the most common word was, in fact, chatra or atapatra. Both of them mean umbrella or parasol. So I'll just read you a little from a commentary on the laws of Manu, which was the first expression of law in the Vedic era. This is the basic text of Hindu law. And, in case anyone didn't know, Brahmins were the priests, the priestly caste. You were born a priest if you were male, and according to their ranking of castes, they outranked kings. So it went priests, warriors, which included kings, merchants, and farmers. Those are the four basic castes. So, the laws of Manu said that those who eat mushrooms are fully equal in guilt to the slayers of Brahmins and the most despicable of all deadly sinners. Yeah, right. It's equivalent to murder. You eat a mushroom, and that is equivalent to murdering somebody of the highest caste. It seems a bit harsh if all we're talking about is an occasional mushroom omelette, but so we have to believe that there is something else going on here. Now, since Wasson in the 1960s published Soma, a book which attempted to demonstrate that the Soma drug spoken of in the Rig Veda was actually a mushroom. In his case, he made the case for Amanita muscaria, the fly agaric mushroom, the red and white mushroom, which I think I've got a picture of, in case anyone is not sure which one we're talking about. Oh, that one didn't. Oh, yeah, it did. There you go. Is that it? Yes. So there you go. That's the red and white mushroom, which is believed to have been Soma. At least Wasson made a good case for it being Soma. And if we look at one of the later Vedas, there are basically four Vedas, supposedly four Vedas. So I say basically, because one of them, the Yajur Veda, has a number of different versions. In fact, there's the white and black Yajur Vedas have absolutely nothing in common. They're not different versions of the same text, they're just different texts. So I'll leave that to someone else to work out why that is the case. But the white Yajur Veda in one of its recensions, speaks of different kinds of soma and two different kinds of rudra. Rudra is thought to be the divine personification of soma, of the soma plant, that is, not the soma drink. The soma pavana, the god of that, was called soma. But the god of the soma plant was Rudra. And it was said that there are two different forms of Rudra, and moreover, they are commonly seen. The Rudras, plural, are seen by the girls who bring water from the spring and the boys who look after the cows. And so these different kinds of Rudras were said to be either red or blue-throated. Now, the blue-throated part is actually quite interesting because the term used is Nila Kanta. Nila is blue, Kanta means throat. It also means like a narrow place where you'd pick something up. As we say, the neck of a bottle. They would say the kanta of something, where you'd pick it up. So there is a related word, a cognate of kanta, which is kanta, without the palatal consonants. With dental consonants, kanta means a stem, a stalk, or a branch. So this seems to be quite simple wordplay, in which Nilakanta is ostensibly blue throat, but it can also mean blue stalk or blue stem. And if we're talking about mushrooms, then certain mushrooms, especially the ones that contain psilocin, come to mind because, for instance, Psilocybe cubensis, when picked, the stalk is frequently bruised, which initiates an enzymatic cascade which turns psilocin into psilocin oxide. The psilocin oxide is inert as far as psychoactivity is concerned, and it's also dark blue. So blue throat possibly, or in my opinion, almost certainly refers to the stem of a psychoactive mushroom. Oh yeah, there's one thing that I overlooked in Monia Williams' Sanskrit dictionary, which I'm sure you all have a copy of. He glosses Uchilindra, the sprouting maggoty thing, as being a specific kind of mushroom. He says it's a mushroom which grows on cow dung. So, of course, he was writing this in 1890 and was not familiar with what this might imply. Now, to continue about parasols, not only did the words for parasol mean mushroom, I mean, it's not like they were codes for mushroom. This was the common everyday term for mushroom. And, a mother might tell a child, don't pick that up. It's a, wait a minute, I've got to think of a word now. It's a parasol. So this was the everyday word for mushroom. And, but there's a certain amount of, I was going to say mythology, it might not be that strong. There is a certain literary tradition about parasols and how royal parasols have a goddess inside them. there is a Jataka tale. You know the Jataka tales of the Buddha's previous lives? In this one called the Mahamagga Jataka, tells the tale of a goddess who dwelt in the royal parasol. One day, she emerged and asked the king for riddles, threatening to decapitate him with her fiery blade should he fail. The king consulted his wise men, but to no avail. The parasol goddess then chided him for not asking his son, Prince Greatherbert. That's Mahoshada if you're intending to look it up in your Monia Williams. She then compares the wise men to fireflies and declares Greatherbert to be a great blazing fire, blazing with wisdom. As expected, Greatherbert proceeds to answer her riddles correctly. After his first answer, her upper torso emerges from the parasol, and at each successive answer, the goddess reveals more of herself. Finally, she steps out of the parasol and rewards Greatherbert with coral and ivory. You see the coral? See, made of coral and ivory. Coral, of course, is red. Now let's zoom forward several hundred years here, and there is a tradition which I only know of it in Tibetan. It probably has an Indian origin, but a lot of Indian Buddhist texts are now lost and only known in Tibetan or Chinese recensions. So, oh yeah, just in passing, we covered a bunch of Sanskrit names for mushrooms in a language called Buddhist hybrid Sanskrit, which is a very bad name. It's not really a version of Sanskrit. It's just it's a Middle Indic language that put on airs by adopting some Sanskrit grammar. But it's not really, but it uses a lot of Sanskrit vocabulary. All the terms for mushrooms that we've covered so far are in Buddhist hybrid Sanskrit. But they also have a few others, including, see I get it right, Ahichatraka, which is snake parasol, well, snake parasol thingy. That car on the end doesn't kind of means thingy. So what have snakes got to do with it? What have snakes got to do with parasols? Well, I'm not sure why. It's possible that it relates to an actual tribe or people, but the Nagas, the shape-shifting snake spirits that are supposed to live underground and control access to treasure. A bit like Smaug, you know, in The Hobbit, you know, there's the dragons control access to treasure. So they are supposed to also have access to drugs. So lots of references to drugs, to Amrita and such, involve Nagas. So here we go. There is a legend that the king of the chthonic serpent spirits presented the Buddha with a jewel-encrusted umbrella. Now, this umbrella is gold with a sapphire handle. I think we all know what color sapphires are, right? Blue. And its edges are studded with jewels, including diamonds, which shine like the sun. The jewels give off a nectar which can quench the thirst of sentient beings. Now, I think thirst here should be explained. It's a technical term in Buddhism, and it means the desire for things to be other than they are, and is considered to be the source of all suffering. Just wanting things to be otherwise. And so, to truly satisfy this thirst is to provide nirvana. Here, just in illustration. So here is a Naga king. You can see the 7 snakes behind his head, and you can also see his snakes lower parts. He doesn't have legs. He has a snake's tail. But in his hands is a pot of Amrita. Yet again, underlying the connection between Nagas and psychoactive potions. So what we're being told in this legend is that the Naga king gave the Buddha a parasol. That's a mushroom. It was golden, so we got a mushroom perhaps with a golden cap, sapphire handle, a blue staining stem, jewels. Now, if you see a fresh psilocybe cubensis with the cap, the stipe the pilius just open, it will have remnants of the cortinate veil. Cortinate means cobwebby, and so the gills are enclosed in this veil, which, when the cap expands, the veil ruptures, but it leaves little fragments around the edge, and if you find it early in the morning before the worms have got at it, it'll frequently have little drops of dew adhering to the remnants of the cortinate veil, looking like jewels. So, and it radiates Amrita. So this is unique in that whole history of umbrellas, that you would imagine that umbrellas are going to keep the moisture on the outside. It's going to keep it away from... No, this one actually radiates liquid, and the liquid is Amrita. So, what we're being told here is that there's a mushroom with a gold-colored cap, a blue staining stem, remnants of a cortinate veil attached to the outer edge of the cap, and it's a source of this psychedelic sacrament. I don't know how many people know the myth of the Samudra Manthanam. This is the myth of the churning of the ocean. Apparently, according to various different, there's about 7 different accounts of this throughout. There's one in the Ramayana, there's one in the Mahabharata, and there's about 5 others in the Puranas. All tell the story slightly differently, but they're clear on the main points. That the gods were dispirited because the anti-gods basically kicked their ass several times, and they were defeated and demoralized, and they went to Vishnu and said, how can we regain our self-esteem? And Vishnu said, well, you'll have to collaborate with the anti-gods in a project. And they said, well, what sort of project? And he said, oh, I don't know, try churning the ocean of milk and see what comes out. So they took a mountain, Mount Mandara, turned it upside down, balanced it on the back of a turtle, a convenient turtle, who happened to be Vishnu himself. He's splits himself into several different avatars at this point. They take the king of the Nagas, again, we've got the Nagas, and they wrap it 3.5 times around the mountain. The gods take one end, and the anti-gods take the other. And they haul him back and forth, spinning the mountain in the ocean of milk. They do this for 1,000 years. And at the end of it, various things, 14 things come out of it. And the last one, the last 2 things to come out is the first physician, Dhanvantari. he comes out with a golden pot of Amrita. Unfortunately, there's a byproduct. Now, the stories diverge on how this byproduct occurred. Some just skip over that part. Others say it was the venom of Vasuki, the king of the Nagas. Others say it was his vomit, that he was so like he was like seasick after being like hauled back and forth for 1,000 years, and he vomited up this. It's either called Visha, which just means venom, Hala, which kind of means mass of blackness, Kala Huta. Yeah, those are the three words used. Anyway, they don't know what to do with it because it's so incredibly poisonous. It threatened to annihilate all living things. So Shiva very altruistically says, yeah, don't worry guys, I got this. And he drinks it. Meanwhile, his wife, Parvati, mountain girl, like, leaps up and grabs the base of his throat and says, don't swallow it, you'll die. Vishnu slaps his hand over Shiva's mouth and says, don't spit it out either, you'll kill us all. And so it remains in Shiva's throat and turns his throat blue. And this is why Shiva is called Blue Throat, Nilakanta. So this is why mushrooms have a blue stem, apparently. There's an interesting Tibetan variant on this. The Tibetans, they start off by saying the poison, hala, was endemic in the world, and they had to make Amrita to counter it. Well, they do. They do the same thing. They churn the ocean. They get the Amrita, and they hand it to a nice, gentle, mild-mannered bodhisattva called Vajrapani. Now, that's an interesting name, because Vajrapani was originally the name of Indra, king of the gods, who was also called Somapati, or the Lord of Soma. And if you read the legends of Indra, you'll see that he doesn't do anything without drinking Soma first. Nothing. Every single deed of Indra is preceded by draughts of Soma. A bit like later stories about Shiva, how he for instance, before going to battle, he is supposed to consume a seer, an indeterminate amount, actually, in India, it's sometimes called a pint or a pound, but he drinks a seer of bhang, which is a cannabis concoction, a seer of Nux vomica, a plant that contains strychnine, and so anyway, the drug, the Amrita, is given to Vajrapani to look after. And now it's not explained why he didn't look after it properly. I mean, perhaps he popped outside to have a cigarette, or he went down the pub or something, and he was not looking after it. And this demon, this anti-god called Rahu, was watching him carefully. And as soon as Vajrapani's back was turned, Rahu stole the Amrita and drank it, the entire world supply. He drank it, and then. Not satisfied with just like taking all of the world's Amrita and drinking it, he replaced it with his own urine. So there should be light bulbs going off above people's heads here. So the Buddhas, when they found the assembled Buddhas who were on top of Mount Meru, this may have been the original summit conference, they decided that in punishment, Vajrapani had to drink the demon's urine. This, by the way, may be, I would defer to Steve Bayer about this, but it may be the reason for the Tibetan translation of Amrita, Dutsi. Dut means demon, and so it's demon juice. Tsi is juice. So Dutsi is, it could be construed as demon juice. Anyway, Vajrapani drinks the demon's urine. And just like Shiva got a blue throat, Vajrapani turned entirely blue. Well, it was the world's supply after all. So he not only turns blue from head to tail, his hair stands on end, his golden ornaments turn into snakes. He's now wearing a necklace and bracelets and ankle ornaments of snakes. And he develops a fierce loathing of demons. He runs after Rahu and annihilates him with his Vajra, and then his thunderbolt, and blows him apart. Of course, he can't die. Rahu is immortal because he's drunk the Amrita. But his blood sprinkled over the planet produces all the medicinal plants that we know. This is the legend. So there is the story of, it tells you that these medicinal plants have Amrita in them, but they also have a bit of demon, so you've got to be careful. Well, to continue. Oh yes. So we've seen that the term Nilakanta means blue throat, but it really means the blue stem of a mushroom, or as they would say it in Sanskrit, umbrella. And so there is a word for the handle of an umbrella. It's the same as staff or club, danda. Danda means a walking stick, a staff, or a club. It's also the handle of an umbrella. And so, logically, we might expect there to be a deity called Blue Umbrella Handle. And there is. Nila Danda it's a Buddhist deity, another version of Shiva. Let's see. Yeah, he's an important protective deity. He's one of the 10 wrathful deities, the Dasha Krodha. Let's see. There's a bunch of illustrations I don't have on this flash drive. As we saw, there is work through these. Oh, here. This one's interesting. So we were looking earlier at Siddhartha the white umbrella. This guy is called Siddhartha, not with a long final A. It's the masculine version, and so his name also means white umbrella. Now, I will give $100 to anybody who can actually find an umbrella or parasol in there. It's like there's no parasol in sight. What there is, though, is a book. Book in Sanskrit is chatra, very similar to chatra, umbrella. So I think there is a little pun going on here, where instead of explicitly saying the word for mushroom, it says book instead. An extra wrinkle.
We were looking at the bottom of the mushroom, like
Yeah, I'm sorry. Somebody pointed out that this looks like a mushroom. I couldn't agree more. This does look, a lot of these thousand-armed deities do suggest the many gills of a mushroom. In fact, it also looks like a wheel, and we'll get to that. Here, I'm going to try and find some other. I'm not used to this contraption. Just a moment. This guy here. Oh dear. That's a tiny one. I'm sorry. There is a deity who holds Urishnisha. It's just a disembodied crown bone. Yeah. I think it's, yeah, but it's not big enough. This is a thumbnail I did by accident. Yeah, you can't really see it. But, yeah. Right. Yeah. All right. So, one of the things about psilocybe mushrooms, or psilocybe as botanists say, is not only that they stain blue. In fact, they only stain blue if they contain psilocin. If they do not contain psilocin, they will not stain blue, even though they may be psychoactive. But all psilocybe species, all of them, have a bump on the cap. It's called an umbo, which is Latin for the raised boss at the center of a shield. But this, I think, may be a clue to the real meaning of Ushnisha in this context. Now, there is a... now, we just looked at that many-armed Sita Tapatra, which comes from Nepal. Now, how about this guy who comes from Japan? Now, this is also Sita Tapatra, except he's got the word Buddha in his name. So he holds, apparently, a parasol. So in his left hand he has the stem of a lotus, and on that lotus is a parasol. So so that's the parasol, right? This is I know Japanese art. They can be pretty damn specific when they get to depicting something. They would have no difficulty showing a realistic parasol. But I think that they knew that parasol actually didn't mean that, a sunshade. See if we can find it. This is the same deity that we just saw, except there's a concept called ayutana. Ayutana is the symbolic form of a deity. So this is the same deity in his ayutana form. And so I may have yet another one. No, I don't. Yeah. So let's go back to that. Oh, here, look. There's an example of mushroom showing the umbo. Certain of these Ushnisha deities will have many arms. Sometimes, occasionally, they're shown in union with their consort. And in one of these cases, one of the hands doesn't actually hold anything, it's placed on the consort's breast. And so I think that this is an actual reference to the nipple-like protrusion on the mushroom. So to go back to that fancy looking one, where is it? Okay. This earlier one that we saw, this one is a very close approximation of a species found in North China, Korea, and Japan. It's occasionally found in this country. It's called Psilocybe liniformans. This one, which is also said to be the same guy, this, to me, strongly resembles Psilocybe argentipes, silverfoot. So listen to this. Well, first of all, the ayutthana has a tiny blip on top. Its edge is curled and wavy with small dangling ornaments. That is supposed to be parasol, so I would say they're ornaments. Okay, so this is Paul Stammett's description of Psilocybe argentipes. The cap has a sharp umbo, see, little blip on top. The margin, that's the edge of the cap, incurved, irregular, often wavy, and adorned with fragments of the partial veil. I mean, these even a 20th century scientist, like looking at this, called those ornaments. He said it's adorned with fragments of the partial veil. So I think there is a very strong case to be made for this particular deity being Psilocybe argentipes. So a lot of these Ushnisha deities are associated with wheels. They're either placed between the spokes of a wheel, like an 8-spoked wheel would have the 8 Ushnishas between the spokes. They frequently hold wheels, stand on wheels, and they have a lot of wheel connections. Carl Rook, who has written on psychedelic mushrooms and the like, has claimed that our word for wine actually derives from an ancient term for a spoked wheel, and he suggests that it originally meant a psychoactive mushroom, and then the term was extended to include this new psychoactive substance that came along called wine. But it may be significant that if you look in Calvert Watkins' Dictionary of Indo-European Roots, you'll find that I actually read the whole thing from beginning to end. And just to check, but there are no words for fungus in there. It's got the word for I think the root is sume, which means yeast or wort, but nothing else. No mushrooms, no other fungus words. So it may be that the taboo against mushroom words actually goes back much earlier than the Aryan incursion into India, but it might go back to Proto-Indo-European. Anyway, there is also, you might notice that Vishnu, the god Vishnu, has his chakra, which means wheel, supported on his finger, like this. You know, and it looks rather like a mushroom. Well, it has a name. It's called Sudarshana, and which means the beautiful, good to look at, literally. And it's fiery, and so we might assume that it's a reference to Amanita muscaria, the fly agaric red and white mushroom. But there are other clues in there as well. I mean, it's quite possible that was his original function. But he's also blue. Vishnu is blue, and he holds a club, gada, as well as the, imagine, club and wheel. He also holds a lotus and a conch shell. The conch shell is standard simile for white. And we say white as snow in Sanskrit, and in Tibetan they say white as a conch. So we may be being told that Vishnu is a blue staining white mushroom. Here's an interesting guy. Look at this guy here. He's standing on one leg, like a mushroom. He is holding a wheel on a stick, and a conch, meaning it's white. This is the constellation Leo. Oh, not constellation, but the zodiac sign, Leo. Singha in Sanskrit, and he governs a month in the middle of the monsoon when mushrooms are found. So let's see. In the goddess we looked at earlier, Ushnisha Sita Tapatra, she has several forms. Okay, here she is. So, in one of her forms, she has the same 1,000 arms as here, but in each of her left hands she has a wheel. In each of the right hands she has an arrow. Now, if it were bows and arrows, you could understand it. But wheels and arrows don't seem to go together, unless there was an ancient tradition of using wheels for target practice, which, wouldn't be very sensible. But I think it's more likely that the wheel and the arrow go together to form a mushroom symbol. So I'll skip over the meanings of the names of all of the Ushnishas, with the exception of a couple. Yes, here you go. So, two of them, the Ushnisha deities we've mentioned so far, Udgata Ushnisha, which Professor Chandra translates as elevated Ushnisha. I translated it as emerging, although I was tempted to translate it as vomit, because it Udgata means upgoing. We might say thrown up, or literally upgone. And in the dictionary, vomited is one of the meanings. If you look it up in your Romeo Williams, you'll see Udgata does actually mean vomited. There's another one called Abhyudgatoshnisha, and in that case, it would be quite understandable to translate it as anointed with vomit. And so, you know, like you vomited all over yourself. Now, nausea is not, it's kind of a minor side effect of psilocybin ingestion. Some people feel a little queasy, especially in the first like half hour or so. Not a big problem. However, with Amanita, it is it's quite normal for people to throw up. In fact, if you look at some of the commentaries, I think this is the Aitareya Brahmana. The Aitareya Brahmana is a commentary on the Rig Veda, written about 2000 BC. Sorry, Rig Veda was 2000. This is about 1000 BC. And it says, at the Soma sacrifice, there are 3 things which are performed by the priests: eating, swallowing, and vomiting. These are the 3 things that were expected of priests at the Soma sacrifice. So there's also an Ekakshara Ushdesha. Now, Ekakshara means 1 syllable. And so usually when you encounter this term, it means Om. Om, the single syllable. Yet again, though, we find that there are alternative meanings. Akshara can also mean axle, the axle of a wheel. And here, if I can find it, let me just... No, I don't have it. Oh, yes, I do. Here it is. Here it is. Okay. So this is a Nepalese drawing of a form of Siddhartha Nisha. So this is another form of the white parasol goddess. It's mentioned in the Siddhartha Sutra that this goddess, Great Illusion, is a form of a... This Great Illusion, Mahamaya, has her own tantra. And in this tantra, this tantra is mostly to do with how to make magic pills and how to take them. And so we'll see in her 3rd right hand, she's actually holding an axle. And so there's also a passage in the Hivadra Tantra in which it speaks of how to kill people by magic. And I don't believe it's really about killing people at all. It's, I thought I had the actual Sanskrit here, I don't. But, oh yes, Hastena to Nabhimula. Nabhi, from Nabha, means navel. It also means the nave or hub of a wheel. And so this says to break apart at the base of the navel. And it also says to do it by hand, hastena, from hasta, hand. So this, rather than being a rite of destruction and killing a human being, this is more likely to be the simple detaching of the head from the stalk of a mushroom. Now, there are a bunch of other things about blue mushrooms, which I'll skip over, and blue deities. But I would point out that this goddess Ushnisha Sitahavatra has a dharani, which is translated as fire, fire, sky equal, powerful one, and oh, Soma lady, says the Wilson and Brown, who some scholars who produced this book on iconography. Concentrated with inspiring power of all Buddhas, crown bump of all Tathagatas, white umbrella lady. Well, I'd revise that for a start. I don't agree with the translation of Soma lady. There's nothing that says lady in there. Soma is a masculine noun, and the form of the inflection, an ablaut inflection they have is Saume, which has two possible translations. The one is a locative in the Soma, which is the one that I would prefer. And so I think it's referring to something in the Soma. And say crown bump of all Tathagatas, I would translate it as psychedelic mushroom of all enlightened ones. Now, one of the reasons that I would take this kind of radical step of translation is that in some texts she's actually called the spiritual food of all Buddhas. So how is this umbrella food? Well, the clue is that the umbrella actually means mushroom. Let's see, and here I think let's see. Here again. Just for fun, here's another version of the umbrella god here, and that looks really like an umbrella. So, okay, I think that's about it. I think that we can deduce from this that not only was Philosophy cubensis used, also possibly philosophy uniformans and philosophy identities were used as sacraments. But I think we can see that despite the massive importation of Shivite literature and Shivite iconography and practices, there may well have been a completely Buddhist substrate, a Buddhist use of Amrita that predates it. That actually this goes back to Mahayana Buddhism, not Vajrayana. So I've just given you the vaguest outline of my paper. There's a lot more detail and corroborating stuff in there, and even more in my book, which is actually called Secret Drugs of Buddhism, and should be out later this year. Thanks very much. Now, questions?
So, if you have any questions, let me grab and bring the microphone to you so you can get it up.
One question. The mushroom that you were showing us can be identified with the species that grows in China. Much of Asia occasionally here. Is that known to be a psychoactive mushroom?
Oh, absolutely.
That's
Yes.
okay, I wasn't sure.
In fact, Stammet says it's quite potent.
So as far as your research to this point, in terms of soma, the identity of the psychointegrator plant there, would you be leaning more toward amanitas or psilocybin or a combination? Because you kind of went back and forth, and it was, people are arguing. There's been a lot of argument as to which plant.
Right.
Or it's not a plant. It's
right. I don't have any strong views on it myself, as you know, my area of expertise is in Buddhism and not Vedic. But in researching this, of course, I've had to look into it. My feeling is that the Aryans originally split off from the Proto-Indo-Europeans, migrated north and east of the Caspian Sea, were formed what is known as the Andronovan civilization, then migrated south, came in touch with the Bactrian Margiana archaeological complex, the Oxus Valley civilization, and there they seem to have picked up their religious use of psychoactives in conjunction with a fire ritual. And this is the ancestor of both the Soma practice, the Agnihotra, where they consume Soma, and also the Hauma rituals of Iran. And so I believe that originally their sacrament was the Amanita Muscaria. But when they migrated to the hotter, drier lands of India, even though northern India was a forest at the time, they found it harder to get the fly agaric, and discovered the Psilocybe cubensis, which they wouldn't have found in their homeland because it's too northerly, too cold. And so Rudra, the god of the Soma plant, became assimilated to the indigenous Shiva. He probably wasn't called Shiva at the time, but I'm sure that there is an expert on the Indus Valley civilization, Professor Mahadevan, who says that he's examined 1,000 Indus Valley seals which contain, which depict something known as the cult object. He was trying to find out what this object was, and he came to the conclusion that it's a sieve for a drug, and that it was a filter or sieve by which the Indus Valley equivalent of Soma was filtered. And so this is an indigenous Indian practice which predates the arrival of the Indo-Europeans. So my guess is that they used Psilocybe cubensis. They were cattle-rearing people. They would have come into contact with it. And so we have these myths and legends of the Aryan people which are included in the Vedas, in which they talk about having to fight the anti-gods. I'm sure these are the kind of apotheosis of the other tribes that they encountered in India. They also talk about having to deal with outsiders to buy their soma. So, and in the Brahmanas, they say, in the Aitareya Brahmana, it says, the soma dealer is a cheat, the soma dealer is a thief. Do not trust the soma dealer. And repeatedly. So obviously these guys were not part of the in-group. They were others. They were perhaps members of indigenous Indian tribes. It's also curious that the laws of Manu, which say that eating a mushroom is equivalent to killing a Brahmin, only apply to the Aryans. They only apply to the 4 real castes, that they brought with them. And I'm just saying real as, from their point of view. I don't mean to take it literally. They considered the outsiders not to have a caste, and so to this day there is no prohibition on tribals eating mushrooms. It's only caste Hindus who mustn't eat mushrooms. And so also we get in the Tantras, we get lots and lots of references to outcast groups, like the Dombi and so on, and Dombini, the Dombi woman, or the laundress is one translation. They may well have been the drug connections. These indigenous groups knew how to get the drugs. Shalvari is another term, and some depictions of Parna Shalvari. This is a depiction of an outside, non-caste group. Many depictions of this woman from that tribe show her with a skirt made of cannabis leaves. And so they are strongly connected in imagery with drugs. Anyway, that's to put it briefly, I think they brought Amanita muscaria with them, but then they encountered another mushroom. Because they were both mushrooms, they kind of classed them together. So it may be possible that there are other somas too. There have been many suggestions as to what soma was, from beer to rhubarb. And I'm serious about that. Somebody actually did suggest it was rhubarb. But the one I am not really happy with is that it was cannabis. There is a book called Cannabis, the Soma Solution, or it might be Soma, the Cannabis Solution, I can't remember, by Chris Bennett, and it's just awful. It's riddled with errors. So, yeah, I'm prepared to be persuaded that it might have been cannabis, but not by that one. Yes, at the back.
The microphone over here first. Hold on one second.
This is
Oh, I'm sorry.
maybe just a follow-up anyway. I was going to ask what the Amrita substance was made of, but is that the same as Soma?
Yes and no. In later tantras, we find references to Panchamrita, which means the fivefold elixir of immortality. So there were basically 5 things in it. And if we read about the 5 Amritas, we are told that they are some quite revolting things. See if I can remember them now. Piss, shit, blood, brains, and vomit. Those are the 5 Amritas. But if we compare it to the medieval Central European practice of direct apotheke, which literally means shit medicine, they did exactly the same things. These doctors that practiced direct apotheke would use disgusting terms for the plants just to hide their knowledge. You see, if they said, the cure for that is donkey feces. Well, they didn't really mean donkey feces. They meant the plant which we are calling donkey feces. So each of these 5 Amritas, these 5 disgusting Amritas, is paired with an animal. And the animals are a dog, horse, cow, elephant, and human. And so these were supposed to be prepared on a bi-weekly basis for consumption at the tantric feast, or Gana Chakra. Well, I don't know about those days, but it's pretty hard to find fresh elephant every 2 weeks. And also, I'm not convinced that the pious Buddhists would be required to be cannibals and eat human flesh. So I've noticed that some texts don't have the same list. Some of them, instead of saying cow, say peacock. Now, I didn't go into this. It's a whole chapter in my book, but in Sanskrit poetry, peacocks were often called nilakanta, blue throat, and in Indian folklore, it's said that you can't eat peacock because it's poisonous. The reason it's poisonous is the original peacock, at the churning of the ocean, drank all the hala hala. Now we know it was Shiva that drank that, and that Shiva is a mushroom. So it seems that cow and peacock in the five meats go with the five amritas, that if cow is the same as peacock, it's probably not either one of them. It's probably a mushroom which grows on cow dung and has a blue throat, like the peacock. I don't know what, like definitively what all the five of the Panchamrita are. Oh, I could tell you this. Our word punch, meaning a mixed drink, comes from the word Panchamrita, meaning the fivefold elixir of immortality. So, the original punch was already spiked.
One last question over here.
Okay, another candidate for the Soma that I've heard about is the Syrian root, Peganum harmala. Do you know about
this is Flattery and Schwartz, right.
Can you say something about that?
Yeah. In Persia and in Zoroastrianism, they have an equivalent of Soma called Hauma. It's a very close connection that an initial S in Sanskrit was an initial H in Avestan. It's a bit like Greek and Latin, hepta in Greek, septa in Latin, sarpa in Latin, hepes in Greek, we know that it is used. It is used today, and it's also the Peganum harmala. Seeds are burned and used as a kind of fumigant, not really perfume. You can try burning it. It's not nice, but it gets you high, and so this is still used as part of Zoroastrianism. Whether it was part of the original, I don't know. It's also Flattery and Schwartz also suggest ephedra. It might be very dangerous to combine the two because Peganum harmala is a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, which would potentiate the ephedrine in ephedra to perhaps dangerous levels. Although it might be that they had the techniques worked out that they could gauge the strength of it. I don't know. David Flattery has also expressed to me personally that he thinks that ephedra may have been Soma. But I actually see there is perhaps some evidence for it when they speak of crushing stems. So it's a very contentious subject, and it's one that I've kind of tried to avoid getting embroiled in because it's not really germane to my particular specialty. But yes, the Hauma is. To this day, if you go to an Iranian market and you ask for hom, that's what they'll give you. They'll give you ephedra. But Peganum harmala goes under a different name, and that's called espand. But it is used. It's not called Hauma, but it is used in Zoroastrian rites. That's all I can say about it, as I'm really not well versed in that area.
Thank you very much. That'll be the last question. Thank you, Mike, and big round of applause for a wonderful talk.